An age ago, the beating heart of our people was a king who knew only victory. He wanted nothing more than an honorable death on the battlefield. Yet, none could match him, and so he wandered the earth, becoming lost in time and tide. Then we too lost our honest purpose, while silk-clad men sat upon the throne. But tremble now, all cities that lay under the stars, for out of the shadows and mists of the land of promise, our courage has been rekindled, our heart has returned, and the world will burn.
All right, how's everybody doing tonight? Someone give me a shout out in the comments. That'd be great, just to make sure you can all hear me. I'm having a little bit of technical difficulties as usual. So, as I said, if someone give me a shout out, that'd be great. Um, my connection is not very good tonight. So, I hope that I'm not going to digitize on you, and I hope I'm not going to drop you, because if I do, that might be the end of the stream. I apologize in advance for any of that. It's just what goes on with my internet. So, again, if anybody can hear me in the comments, give me a shout. All right. Sounds good. Sounds good. All right. Thank you very much, Abrax. Um, I had a little difficulty yesterday with my Wednesday live stream. We had a snowstorm here, an early snowstorm. It was unexpected, and I could not stream. I just could not. I lost everything. The good news on that is the fact that the guy is finally supposed to come tomorrow to install the Starlink. Um, so um, hopefully we will be getting a little bit better internet service here, and I will not be having to deal with as many of these technical problems. And also, I was trying to upload something, basically some Tarzan pictures in the background for a movie for the last couple of minutes here. But again, technical difficulties. I think it's best I just go with what I got, and we'll go with simple backgrounds tonight. Again, I'm not pushing my luck with anything that's going on. So I want to talk about heroes tonight. And this is almost like it was a normal one of my videos for a Saturday, but I ran across something that I really want to cover, but I don't think it's something I'm going to cover on my main channel. Um, oh, I suppose I should do my normal spiel at the first. I am going to answer everybody's questions and talk to everybody when I finish my 20 minutes of talking about my topic. Very quick update on my graphic novel. If you haven't heard, the shipping has been delayed just because we're still working on the last touches of one of the stories, and we're just trying to get it out there. We had some problems with that last story, which is the Rampaging Thor. We can't do anything until we have that last bit done. Everything else is done, and some of it's printed. But if you're wondering, also, there are links in the description for my 3 graphic novels, my 2 superhero graphic novels, and my return to form for low fantasy, which is Crom the Destroyer. I'll show some of that in the background just for beginners here. Let's see if I can put up some Crom the Destroyer. I'll put some Valiant Heroes in the background. How's that? So there's that. And like I said, anybody want to ask any questions, put it in the comments. I'll try to get through the comments with a little more speed tonight than I have been for the last little while. Anyways, what I wanted to talk about was the fact that I ran across this very interesting interview. This is why sometimes I love the internet. It's because this interview was from a Comic-Con, it appears, in 1990 in Dallas. And it was Will Eisner talking to a panel of people There was also Harvey Kurtzman, I do believe, was the other person. There was just really wasn't a panel. It was just the two of them. And then there was someone introducing them. So Will Eisner, for anybody who just walked in here and doesn't know, is basically the grandfather of comic books. He is the one who wrote The Spirit, which is his most famous costumed hero. He doesn't call them superheroes, he calls them costumed heroes. But he also wrote a number of other superheroes under pseudonyms. A lot of the, we'll say, Freedom Force kind of characters, he wrote a bunch of those, like the Blackhawks and Doll Man, and a couple of those things that got eventually incorporated into DC Comics. But he wrote them under, as I said, pseudonyms. He was working on at his own studio with, I think it was just a couple of artists, and they wanted to make it look like they actually were having more people employed there than they actually had. So they just used a lot of pseudonyms. But anyways, Kurtzman is the man who created Mad Magazine, just if you're wondering as well. So those are the two guys on the panel. And just I want to scroll down a little bit here, make sure that everybody is hearing me correctly. So like I said, I'm very jumpy about my connection here tonight. But anyways, Eisner started to talk about heroes, and he started to talk about where heroes come from. And I thought it was a very interesting conversation. And I'm going to go over that, just a little bit of that, and then into a couple of other things that he said, because I think they're worth covering and talking about, especially with the kind of comic industry that we have now. So he talks about heroes as a natural expansion of what society needs. He says that society has a need for something. And so artists and storytellers especially step in to help fulfill that need. I would say step in to help fulfill that need to begin with before you really get the fulfillment of it in real life. And that fulfillment of that need, that is a discussion of heroes that I talked about a long time ago in my channel. I haven't talked about it in a while. It's more of the fact that a hero is the embodiment of the hopes and dreams of fears of your society. And that's the old, very, very old, ancient Greek way of defining the word of hero. If you go back to, like Agamemnon and Achilles and all those, where you get the Greek battles, where you have not just a army fighting another army, but you have a champion of that army fighting a champion for another army. So those men became known as heroes, and because they were the embodiment of the hopes and dreams and fears of the people. Because if they lost, the people in their entire country would be possibly even enslaved, if not at the very least, have to pay tribute to the conquerors. So I think that's the kind of idea that he's going with when he's talking about heroes in this vein. But the really interesting thing is when he talks about where those heroes came from in his time and slightly before his time. He said that before his time, and the reason why I put Tarzan in the thumbnail of this live stream was because he was talking about the Tarzan-like heroes before his time, because Will Eisner started writing comics, I think it was 1936, and he did so all the way up until, I think it was about 2000. When did he die? 2005, I do believe. But anyway, he was talking about the ones that preceded him, the heroes that preceded him in this kind of fantasy genre. And he talked mostly about Tarzan. And he said it was because there was that need in society of humanity was going into the last dark places of the earth at that time. And so they needed a hero like Tarzan, who could go into those dark places and show them that, there's nothing really to be afraid of there. And, we can conquer our fears of this unknown place. But he said, after that point, when he came along, when you get the early 1900s, he said it shifted for a societal need at that point to more of a man versus man kind of hero, because the Tarzan kind of hero is a man versus nature. But it shifted to a man versus man because you had these, well, for YouTube's sake, these tyrannies that were appearing all over the world. And of course, these were tyrannical governments and all these kinds of things and people that ran them. And so you needed heroes to fight against these villains. And again, this became a man versus man. And he said he thinks where the heroic idea for comic books came from. And right up until, again, he's given this talk in the 1990s. Right up until that point, he said that's exactly what it was. And the people writing these comic books were for helping fulfill that need of, quelling the fears and stoking the hopes and desires of the society around them in that milieu of man versus man and the tyrannical sort of governments and people that tried to take over in the world right up until that time. So here's the interesting thing. Okay. Before I go any further with that, I want to go over a couple of points that Eisner talks about in this interview, because again, very interesting interview. You can find it on YouTube. It's in a 4-part section. I think it's just Phoenix Comic Con 1990. I think it's like 15 June, something like that. Some fellow who has like 4 videos on his website, or probably about 10 actually, for Comic Con interviews, has them up there. But anyways, you can tell from this interview with Kurtzman and Eisner that both of them are on the left. Now, they're on the left according to back in 1990. I don't think they'd be considered on the left today. Now, that point might be argued, but the reason why I say they're on the left, and obviously they are, because there started a conversation, because most of it was them answering questions. It started a conversation by one of the questions about censorship. And Will Eisner was talking about censorship, and he started to say, I think I'm sounding like one of those right wingers. So, he was never asked, but it was an offhand comment that he made. So obviously he didn't believe himself to be on the right wing. He thought himself as on the left wing. But when he goes to talk about censorship, Kurtzman, first of all, just says, well, you can't make good art with censorship. And Eisner says, well, here's the thing about censorship. He says, you can't, what does he say? You can't have censorship actually work. It doesn't work. People always try to get around it. People will always find a way to get around it. It doesn't work. He said, so you can't have censorship, and you should just get it out of there. But at the same time, I'll put up Crom the Destroyer in the background so you have something to watch. Give me 1 second here. Crom the Destroyer, Crom the Destroyer. Here we go. At the same time, when talking about censorship, he said, no, you can't have censorship. It's not going to work. But the artist he talks about as having censorship within themselves. And that's a good thing. And so he says, when he was an artist, and he was an artist at this time, but he's talking about it in the terms of, an artist self-censors themselves, and they should do so. Why? Because he says, if you're someone who is, and this is the 1990s, so he says, if you're someone who is, let's say, doing art with graffiti on a bathroom wall, you're not going to have a very large audience. But if you have someone who is publishing a comic book, and you're publishing hundreds of thousands of copies of this book, you are going to make a societal impact. And the thing is that he says, you got to think about what you're going to put down on the page. Again, this would be the self-censorship he's talking about. Why? He says, because what you put down on the page can affect society in a positive or a negative way. And so you need to think about what you're doing. And the really interesting point here is why I would say he's probably not, we wouldn't be considered today, I don't think, on the left at all. They would be considered on the right, because he says, because if you put something out there in the world which damages society, you as an artist need to take responsibility for that. And that was very much his way of stating that. And I thought that was extremely interesting, and a very, very interesting way of looking at the entire topic. Now, I don't agree with Eisner on all the things he had to say within this interview, but it was very, very interesting nonetheless. And now he moved on also to talk about, there was a question about why, if there were so many Jewish people within the creation of comic books, why do you see just these, and this is 1990s, remember, so these questions were asked a long time ago, why are there only these white heroes, these white male heroes? And he says, well, there's several reasons for that. And he talks about it in terms of ethnic heroes. And in case you weren't alive or aren't American, if you weren't alive in the 70s, and well, I guess really the 70s, the term ethnic is the 70s term for what we basically call BIPOC today. They would say ethnics instead of people of color, or, the Black, indigenous people of color, which is what BIPOC means. Anyways, even though ethnic would also mean things like Italians and Eastern Europeans. Funny note here. I want to stick this note in here. The funny thing is that he talks about everything being in terms of a WASP, which is White Anglo-Saxon Protestant, which is the old name for what you basically got in America. You got White Anglo-Saxon Protestants. So Eisner says, well, there weren't just Jewish people, there was a lot of Italians and others as well. And so Italians would not be, white, or sorry, they would be white. So supposedly, I'll get into that. They would be, but they wouldn't be Anglo-Saxon, nor would they be Protestants. So they wouldn't be WASPs. So they were considered ethnics. And the point is that if you go back to the 1800s, by the way, and look at anything that's written about, let's say, white people at that time, 1800s and earlier, especially if it's coming from, in English, we'll just say in English, or sometimes even Central Europe. So Eastern Europe, everybody who was in Eastern Europe, white European people in Eastern Europe, and Italians, and Greeks, and Spanish, and by the way, Irish, were not considered white. Just to let you know, okay? That's a little historical context there. So none of those people would fit into the WASP category at all. So anyways, because again, you get your Eastern Europeans and your Greeks, which would be Orthodox, they're not Protestant, and your Italians and your Spanish and your Irish, they'd all be Catholic. So they're not fitting into white Anglo-Saxon Protestant at all. But he talks about this in terms of the fact that, well, there's several different reasons why you're going to see this WASP type character on the page all the time. Number one, he says, if you look at comic strips, that's not the case. He says in comic strips for newspapers, you're going to see this ethnic background of these characters come out a lot more. Number two, he says, within comic books, you don't see it as much. Why? Because he says you're trying to sell books. And this is what he talks about a number of times in this interview. Very interesting, because you don't get that in the modern comic industry, to say the least. He's saying you're trying to sell books, and your main audience is, guess what? Midwestern white teenagers. That's it. Well, he doesn't say white. He says Midwestern teenage boys. Sorry, he doesn't actually say white. That's a mistake on my part. So scratch that. So he says your main audience is Midwestern boys, teenage boys, and you want to give them something that they recognize. And so you go with the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And that's the thing. He's saying you're trying to sell books, and this is your main audience. And he also says at another point that if you want to go with that ethnic type of heroes and these other kinds of different kinds of stories, which are like underground comics, he says you can go right ahead and do that. But if you do, you're going to lose your main audience, because your main audience is typically that, again, Midwestern teenage boy. Again, which is something you would never hear at the modern comic industry say whatsoever, because this is the exact thing that has happened to the comic industry. They've gone into this, as you would say in the 70s, ethnic ghetto of trying to accommodate just these people and those people, and they lost their entire audience. And the third thing he says, again, which was why I would say he probably wouldn't be considered on the left anymore today, is he says that whenever people come into America as immigrants, the immigrant wants to, and again, he's talking in the 1990s, an immigrant wants to, above all, assimilate. That's what they want to do. And again, here's this man who has been surrounded by what, again, he calls ethnics for all of his life. Why? Well, first of all, it might be the fact that he said you want to assimilate because you want to get into jobs and things like that, and you just can't do it unless you assimilate. So most of the people on the left would say, well, it's not that way anymore today. But again, he's talking about selling books. He's talking about an industry that is something that's healthy, not what people are talking about today. Because he's talking about comics, and he's saying within comics, the reason why you had so many ethnic people come into comics and to create all these heroes is because it was not considered a serious industry in any way. And so since you're an ethnic person, you don't get a serious job because they don't give them to you. You go into these other fields that are not considered serious, and you do your best, and they created the great industry. He said, I never thought when I was working on comics in what they call the golden age that I turned to the guy beside me and said to him, hey, guess what? We're working in the golden age. He said, no, that didn't happen. They just worked and did the best that they could. And again, it's a very interesting way that he talks about it, because what he's talking about is he's talking about comics as a tree. He says it's very different from a lot of other kinds of genres and a lot of other kinds of telling ways of telling stories. He says, because there's so many branches of how you can tell a comic story or a sequential art story, is basically what he calls it. And the thing is that he says, what you do is you try to not only be part of that branch of comics that is the healthiest, which again at that time was mainstream comics, but also what you try to do is you try to prune that branch off so that it becomes as healthy as possible. Because he said, again, you have underground comics and comic strips and all these kinds of things. So sequential art can do many different things. But again, the healthiest branch is going to be the one that's going to, you know, grow the best. And how does he say you got to prune it? He says you got to have people who can find merit. You got to find people who have talent, and you have to foster that talent within them. Let's put up some Will Eisner in the background now that we went over Crom the Destroyer just for a little bit. These are just pages from his books. If let's see, I'll find some pages. No, give me 1 second here. I think this is the Will Eisner book. Let me put it up in the background. Yep, this is one of Will Eisner's little parts from his book. Anyways, but he talks about, again, he needs to, and he talks about himself doing this and attaching himself to other people who did this throughout the comic industry. You need to find someone who can recognize talent, and then once that talent is recognized, hire them, and then once they're hired, expand upon that talent while they're there. So he's talking about merit. He's talking about people with merit. You find somebody with merit and you foster that merit. And again, that's the exact opposite what you would get within today's comic industry. Because today you go and hire somebody because of their ethnic background, again, using those 70s terms, really. And they think that their stories are going to be well told because they're ethnic, and they're going to have a true voice within that ethnic voice. Again, that's not what he's talking about at all. He's talking about something completely different for a healthy comic industry. Now, here's the point of all of this and why I want to go over some of it. We started off talking about heroes, and Will Eisner talks about heroes as I said at the first, a representation of the hopes, fears, and dreams of a society. So prior to him, there was Tarzan and Tarzan-like characters, and that was a man versus nature fear that was in society. And then it moved on to comic books, and you got a man versus man because there was these men and countries and tyrannies all over the world. Again, especially springing out of the 20s, 30s, 40s, when he was breaking into comics and trying to create the basic structure of the industry that we know today, helping create it anyways. It was man versus man. But I would take that, if I was to take that Will Eisner mindset and apply it to the world today, I would say, okay, let's take that. First, it was man versus nature within the 1800s, late 1800s, and then within the 1900s, right up until 1990 when he's talking, he says it's man versus man. For me, I would say, let's continue on that thinking. And what do we have for a hero today? I would say the heroes that we have for today, if it's based upon the hopes, dreams, and fears of a society, is man versus himself. Because we have so many people who hate America, who hate themselves, who hate anything that has to do with the civilization that has been built. And again, we're talking about American comics here, so that's why I'm focusing on that. But these people hate what actually makes the society within which these hopes and dreams and fears exist. And so it is man versus himself. That's what you get within today's society. And I think that's what you need to focus on. Again, if we take this to its logical conclusion, taking his premises as being correct, this is what we need to focus on today. Focus on this idea of man versus himself. And there is a basic internal struggle within many of the heroes that needs to come out within the storytelling, the heroic storytelling and the sequential art. If you're in it like me, doing stories with sequential art within my graphic novels, that's what I think would need to be focused on. If, again, we take that pattern as holding to be true. And the thing is that, again, it is something that, as he said, is fulfilling a need. He said, these societies have a fear, And there is a need for that fear to be quelled in some way. And the storytellers move in first and tell their stories about heroes to quell that fear. And quite honestly, I think this is where Comicsgate came from. I think this is where the offshoots of Comicsgate have started to come out of. It's because, of course, things like the Iron Age, which I would say is probably just an offshoot of Comicsgate. You could argue with me on that point, but my point is that if it is this fear of you have to hate yourself, and this is what the quote unquote progressive people, the far leftists, and even sometimes moderate leftists now want you to hate America, which is if that's part of your society, hate yourself or hate yourself just because of the color of your skin, all these kinds of things. Again, it's that's that fear that needs to be overcome. And that's the heroes that need to be made on the page, but also the people who are making them need to show. And again, we are trying to show within Comicsgate and other things like the Iron Age, we're trying to show no, you don't need to hate yourself. No, you don't need to hate your country. Sure, things can be improved, but let's just focus on the positive. Let's go with constructive criticism and let's have some fun. And this is part of the reason why I'm doing these videos is because let's make comics fun again. It's the fact that let's take all that baggage of you got to hate yourself and you got to hate your country. Let's take all of that and dump it in the toilet and just flush it. And let's just make good comics and comics we enjoy. That's what I'm doing. Sure, there may be, some tinges of culture war and all these kinds of things within the videos that I do and all these kinds of things that I put up on the internet. And it may be sort of the inspiration of some of the heroes that you're going to see within the page, or at the very least, how they're expressed and all these kinds of things. But when I thought about it and I looked back at my characters, yeah, that's what you get. You get a heroic story, and it's a very much a have fun. You're going to have fun. You're going to start off with action. That's what my stories are. Within all of my graphic novels, you start off with a bang. It is, a Marvel type storytelling. You start off most lightly with a splash page, and it's, action from page one. So have some fun. That's first of all to tell you, yeah, you don't have to be sitting there hating yourself or your country or anybody else around you. Have fun. And then you move on to the characters and the heroes within those stories. And the heroes within those stories, they have an internal struggle within themselves, which expresses the reason why these heroes are there on the page. And I think it speaks to your audience, which is something Will Eisner is always on about. He's talking about, how even in this interview, he talks about how you need to make a connection with the artist and the audience. And that connection needs to be there in order for the audience to trust the author enough for them to engross themselves within the story. And that's what needs to be done today. And that's why I think his pattern of let's look at a hero and where they come from, not so much how they're constructed, but where they come from, especially within the last, 200 years within our society and moving into the future where he no longer is alive. That's what we need to do. And that's what I really wanted to talk about tonight. And I'm glad that I got 20 people in here on a Thursday night to listen to my ramblings about heroes and about Will Eisner. So I'm going to go through some of the comments here because I've been talking for about almost 30 minutes now. And if you have any questions at all for me about my graphic novels, about any of my videos, about this video, what I have to say tonight, anything you want, just throw them in the comments, put a question mark after them, or tag me so that I know that they're for me, and I will do my best to answer all the questions here. Although, like I said, I'm going to try to get through them with some speed tonight, just because I don't know how stable my internet connection is. Let's see who is in here in the chat. We have Sound Engraver. How you doing? Sound Engraver was here from the very beginning. As I always do, I give a shout out to Sound Engraver. If you want a channel like mine, but is focused more on the musical, go on over to Sound Engraver's channel. She has some great stuff over there, especially if you're into music. So let me, I'm going to have to re-up before I lose anything. I'll show you some Crom the Destroyer in the background one more time. Beautiful art from many of my different artists on Crom the Destroyer. All right, so Sound Engraver's here. Let's see, Abrax is here. We have John. How you doing, John? Glad to see you. Tony is here in the chat. And again, we have Samuel. How you doing, Samuel? Samuel says, any updates on the shipping shenanigans, RJ? Yeah, I just gave an update at the very first. If you were here, Samuel, again, problems with just getting that last book in printable quality. That's what we're having right now. So we're working on the print files for the Rampaging Thor, and we can't move on anything else until we finish that. Sound Engraver. Let's see who else we got. Scrolling down. Bethel is here. How you doing? And let's see, scrolling down. Da, 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 da. Just John says, short of your connection, hope you're doing well, RJ. Yes. If anybody saw the post that I made yesterday, I talked about the snowstorm that hit us. We're doing okay. It all melted by now, but again, it was just knocking out my internet, so it was unexpected. Michael is here in the chat. How you doing, Michael? Let's see, scrolling down. What does Michael have to say? I've got to bring it up on the main screen. It was in the 70s till today down. It was in the 70s till today down in Texas. Yeah, I heard about that. I think the middle of the continent is going to be getting the majority of the cold this winter. That's what it looks like. So that's the way it is. Scrolling down. Scrolling down. Bethel says, how much does Starlink cost in the US? I think that really depends on where you are. Honestly, I think there's some kind of regional thing, Bethel. Honestly, I may be completely wrong about this, but it seems like you have to go order the stupid thing online, but then you got to deal with regional people. So I really don't know if it has to do with the regional connections or not. Anyways, let's see. Scrolling down. Scrolling down. See who else is here. I got Harumph is here. How you doing, Harumph? Let's see. I'm going to put Harumph up in the comments just because he has a exclamation point. I'm not entirely sure what Harumph is referring to there, but he just harumphing. Let's see. Scrolling down. John is trying to be funny by saying, "Shh, everyone, don't interrupt, Professor." I'm not a professor. I was on the path to becoming a professor at one point, and I said, "No, I really don't want to be in that system very much." Scrolling down. Let's see. Scrolling down. Oh yeah, Michael has a good comment here. He says, "Tarzan is the only classical character that will never be race swapped." I don't think he could be, quite honestly. Knowing the Tarzan stories, I don't think, no, I've certainly not read all the Tarzan stories. I have a big tome of them in my bookcase, but yeah, I don't think you could swap Tarzan. It would, yeah. Let me put it this way. I think if you tried to race swap Tarzan, it would be an entirely different character. There's no way that you would be able to do that. So there's that. Scrolling down. Samuel also says, those Tarzan pulps were so much fun to read for me recently. Yeah, you can get a good copy of I guess it's the main works of Tarzan for probably about $30 online. So they're fairly cheap. Good stuff if you want to read something really old pulps that are great. Scrolling down. Although there are some good comics as well. Let's see. Rex is here. How you doing, Rex? Rex says, glad you're up and running tonight. Yes, indeed. If I can't stream on a Wednesday, I do try to stream on a Thursday, although this is the first time I've had to do that. Let's see. We're going through these comments fairly quickly tonight. Michael says the Greeks participated in the Olympics naked. Yes, they did. That is historically accurate, although you have to remember that they were only males. Let's see, scrolling down, Calliope is here. RJ, where were you last night? Yes, last night, as I've been saying, Calliope, my internet got knocked out by a snowstorm. So wasn't able to do so. I posted I posted a post, I guess I would say, on the community section of my YouTube channel, let everybody know that I wasn't going to have a live stream. So hopefully, if you don't see me up on Wednesday, you might want to go over to the community section, see if I've had some comment there that might explain what is going on in the future. Although, like I said, the guy is supposed to be here tomorrow to help fix my internet. So let's hope. I'm not going to put all my faith in this, but let's hope that it's going to solve a lot of my problems. Rex says, also, to clarify something from last week about poor communication, I take it he meant skills. It refers to situations where characters don't communicate with each other and it leads to misunderstandings. That's the funny thing, honestly. Rex, we were talking about this last week. He's right, about how you can have two different kinds of miscommunication within your storytelling. There is a deliberate miscommunication you can put in sometimes, again, where you have characters that don't see eye to eye, and so there's going to be a disconnect within what they're saying. But again, you have to have that disconnect forefront in what your conversation is going to have in order for it to be part of the continuous story that is going to flow. So, but we were talking more about last week how dialogue within comics right now and other kinds of stories is very stilted because you have people talking at each other, not to each other. And that's something that a good editor would just chuck out the window the first chance they would get. So obviously these people are not being edited by anybody with skill. Let's just put that. Let's see. Sound Engraver says, let's see. I got to put this up on the main screen here. Transcribing Thanksgiving music while listening in. We need more music for this wonderful holiday. I don't even know what in the world is Thanksgiving music. Don't you just play Christmas music by the time it's Thanksgiving? I don't know. Depends on where you are, I guess. Some people don't like that. But yeah, what is something that's traditional? Put that in the comments, would you, Sound Engraver? What's a traditional Thanksgiving music playlist look like? All right. Let's see. Scrolling down, Bethel says, Edgar Rice Burroughs' creation of Tarzan is as important as Robert E. Howard's Conan, but people have forgotten that Tarzan exists, and by overwhelmingly only superheroes. Who knows? Who knows, Shauna here? Yeah, here's the thing. I was trying to upload some really beautiful pictures. They were Jusku pictures of Tarzan and Shauna within the technical difficulties that I was having before I started streaming, because they're great characters. But again, here's the thing. Again, if we go back to the Will Eisner way of talking about this, which is what I was covering, he would say that, yeah, those are great stories and they're great characters, but the reason why they don't resonate today with the reader is because we're in a society which has different motivations and different fears, and therefore why you can get the odd person here and there understanding where a lot of this is coming from and enjoying it. If you're just enjoying it, say, on a fantastical level, that is to say a fantasy story kind of level, but you're not going to connect with the audience like they did when they originally came out, because we have different needs and fears and desires right now. So that would be I think the Will Eisner way of putting that. But again, not to say that those stories are not great. I agree. They are beautiful stories. Scrolling down. Let's see. Excuse me. Just one second. Okay, let's see. John says, I searched for Phoenix Comic Con 1990 on YouTube and couldn't find it right quick. Okay, John, if you're wondering, if you can't find it right quick, thank you very much, John, for doing that. I can't do it right now because it might disrupt my poor internet. But after I'm done of the live stream and I just close everything out, I will go to this page, which is uploaded directly to my YouTube when it goes to the live section. And I'll put the link I have for that in the pinned comment, okay? Just for anybody who's looking for it. Again, but it is in 4 sections, so you have to kind of go follow. There's like 15-minute sections. I think it's an hour. So I'll do that for you, John. And anybody else who wants to do that. I don't particularly like to point people out within right away, unless people really want it, that put these things up on the internet, because a lot of the people who do this would not like any connection with me whatsoever. And sometimes I've done it before and they get really upset with me, but 6 of one, half dozen of another, they're going to get upset anyway. So who cares, I guess, right? All right, scrolling down. Let's see, scrolling down. Samuel says, I think the Disney Tarzan movie was the last time a Tarzan adaptation really stuck with the culture. I never actually saw that movie. What's his name from, I can't even remember names. I'm so bad with names, but the guy from Highlander, he played a really good Tarzan in I think it was early 1980s. Maybe it was mid to late 1980s, but that was really good Tarzan, if you ask me. And you had beautiful acting from a lot of different classical actors in that as well. So to me, that would be the movie version of Tarzan that I would go back to in my mind. Let's see. Scrolling down. See what else we got here. Oh, Michael has a good comment. Sherlock Holmes fighting Tarzan would be crazy cool, awesome. If done right. Uh, I applaud your enthusiasm, Michael. Crazy cool, awesome. Yeah, that would be very interesting. Although, because they would be, I guess, I don't know. The timelines in my head don't um, are not as exact as I would like them to be. But let me put some Tarzan, no, not some Tarzan, some Crom the Destroyer up in the background again for 1 second. But to say, I think that they both operate in, Victorian England. So there's that, and we might be able to see such a crossover within their lives. They're both Englishmen, as it were, if I remember correctly. What is it? I think the name of the movie is Lord of Greystoke, by the way, that I'm thinking of. So again, that brings him back to being an English lord. So there's that. Let's see. Scrolling down, Calliope says, I got to bring these things up on the main screen to read them. I used to run across Sheena comics off and on when I was a small kid. I was never able to pick up any of her comics. Let's see. So yeah, one of the great things about, here's one of the very interesting things that I think that current comics owe to the Tarzan stories, and you'll find this wherever you go if you get into making comics, is the fact that I mentioned this a couple of times on my live streams here, is the fact those comics, especially the early Tarzan comic strips, actually set the proportions of a human being to make them look more dynamic and real for sequential art. That's exactly what, because they're not exact. They're not exact proportions of a human being. They're slightly elongated, and they were developed through the Tarzan comic strips, and it was brought right into comic books, and you got those proportions right up until the 2000s. They started to fudge them with Vertigo. The Vertigo line went with the original proportions of a human being. But really, if you're looking for traditional superhero comics, even today, they still use those elongated proportions from the Tarzan comic strip. So that's a I think a great connection with comics and those Tarzan stories. Let's see. I'm not sure if Rex is asking this question to me, but he says, why doesn't anyone realize Clark Kent is Superman? Simple. Nobody in Metropolis thinks Superman has a secret identity. That's a really good point. Rex. I had never thought of that. Uh, let's see. Scrolling down, Bethel says, let's go more retro. Who knows here, Prince Valiant or the Phantom? But yes, Will Eisner was correct about the responsibility part. We are all responsible to uphold our morals and standards. Again, I wouldn't agree wholeheartedly with what Will Eisner is saying there. He would be a little bit looser than me on some of the things that he would do personally. He said within that interview, he said, I think because it was a really bad auditory part of the interview, you can't hear it exactly as well as you might like. But he says, I would have no problem. He says, I would have no problem working for Hustler magazine. I just don't, because I don't think I can add anything to any of that medium or anything else. Personally, I would have a problem with that. I wouldn't do something like that. But anyways, that's my moral standard. But yes, I would say Prince Valiant is a long forgotten hero that should be rediscovered by a lot of people. And the Phantom, again, is one of those things that really the Phantom, it depends on where you are in the world, Bethel. There are some European places, Scandinavian countries that really have kept on with the Phantom stories and a lot of those pulp old heroes. And you can see even today stuff coming out from comic producers there within those stories. So again, if you want to go to other parts of the world, if you can find, I don't know, translations of them, you might be able to find comics of them even today. Let's see. Sound Engravers says, they made the hate yourself a blasted virtue. I'm not for gross self-care culture, but honor the dignity of human life. You should be good from there. Yes, you should be good from there. Sound engraver, I completely agree. Again, and this is where I think that this backlash is coming from, that the people in the main comic industry don't understand, because they live in this bubble. They don't understand the main thrust of what culture is going through right now. They're actually on the side of the what to be afraid of, because they're telling you your country is evil, hate yourself, hate your country, and oh, by the way, your country is going to fall probably by, not if not their hands, the hands of people like them. So yeah, they're the people who are the villains, and really, they think themselves the heroes. So that's where that lies. Let's see. Scrolling down, Rex says, RJ, if my graphic novel was has mo- if my graphic novel has multiple characters, should I treat them like individual issues or like smaller parts of a larger story? Rex, that's a hard question to ask, by the way. If you want to click on, I'm sure, Rex, if you want to put anything in the comments about where people can find your stuff, you go right ahead. Rex is working on his own stuff, his own graphic novel. For me, Rex, I started off with the Valiant Heroes, and had a focus on Thomas Valiant, which is to say, focus on one hero. Then I moved into, so the first graphic novel I did was Thomas Valiant, number one. So it was a group of heroes, but I focused on one of them. Then we moved on to what is being published right now, which is the Valiant Heroes, and there's a concentration on smaller stories, and you'll see these characters fleshed out a little more individually. And then we're going to move back into Thomas Valiant number two, and a backup story with Thomas Valiant. So again, we're going from larger stories which concentrate on one individual who is part of a group, and then I do smaller stories to flesh out the smaller characters. So it really depends on what you're trying to do and how you can get those things out into the world, I would say, Rex. Let's see. John says, envy is like a virus. It starts small, wants to spread, does lots of damage, and is hard to avoid or remove. Thankfulness is the only remedy I know of. Yes. Here's the thing. A lot of people come, I agree, John. And just to add to that point, a lot of people have come to my channel because of the fact that I talk about heroes, and because I talk about basically Western society in a positive way, and heroes in a positive way. And even though I'm, according to many people, very negative most of the time, but I don't see myself as being negative. I see myself as being constructively critical. But the point is that really the reason why I was able to get Renzo for an artist is because, and the other artists like Jim O'Reilly and Nick X and a lot of people, even Mike Gustovich, a comic great, to work with me, is because they found my channel and they said, I like what you're doing. I like your message. I like the positive understanding of our culture and where it has come from and all these kinds of things. And really that's a thankfulness. I'm showing a thankfulness for what Western society has given the world, and other people are reciprocating that thankfulness back to me, saying that I want to be a part of something you do. So I would double triple down on what John has just said, saying being thankful. You want to be thankful. It will open doors, so many doors to you. It has for me anyways. So again, coming up on Thanksgiving, it's a great comment. And Sound Engraver has just given me a super chat. Thank you very much, Sound Engraver. Says, good to see you're streaming this week. Yes, thank you very much, Sound Engraver. As I said at the beginning of this video, go on over to Sound Engraver's channel and give her a subscription, because she does a lot of the commentary that I do, but more in a music vein. So let's see. Tony has a comment here. Thank you once again, Sound Engraver. Tony says, RJ, were you a fan of Epic Comics Shadowline universe? Let me put it this way, Tony. I did read those comics, and I was very much enthralled by the idea with so many comics. And I say this a lot. You're going to hear, if you are here for any length of time, you'll hear me say this again and again. Let me put some crown back up again. But there were stories that I really felt attracted to and wanted to get to them. But at the same time, when I did read them, they weren't for me. I really didn't like them. I don't know why, and I couldn't tell you because it's been so long since I actually read those stories, but they didn't resonate with me. Let's put it that way. Although I think that if those characters and those heroes were actually done in the way in more a heroic vein, then I would probably have, glommed onto those things. Just put it. Let's see. Scrolling down, scrolling down. Bethel says, I'm not sure this is for me, but it's a good comment. There is a Sheena, Queen of the Jungle, and a Shauna, the She Devil. Yes, I think I'm pronouncing those correctly, but I could not be because I'm very bad with names. So thank you very much, Bethel, for making that clarification. And Calliope says, further to that, I see that Sheena was blonde and Shauna was a ginger. I have never heard of Shauna before. She seems half Sheena and half Red Sonja from the looks of her on Google. Yeah, I wish I had actually uploaded those backgrounds because I had a lot of pictures of she was included in them. Again, those Jusku pictures, but I apologize for not getting that done in time. Maybe I'll do it just for some Jusku backgrounds later on in one of my live streams. Let's see, scrolling down, scrolling down. Sound Engraver has another comment here. Says, you're close, RJ. A good Thanksgiving selection is hymns with lyrics expressing thankfulness, but American colonial music is good enough too. Yeah, I never thought of it that way. That's an interesting, very interesting. Thank you, Sound Engraver. I hadn't thought of that. I listen to a lot of Gregorian shit. And stuff like that. So they get the going back to colonial music is not something I typically do. I go back to we'll say Crusader music and things like that. Yeah, it's the stuff I listen to when I'm trying to get inspired. Let's see. Scrolling down a little bit. Sound Engraver also says, "Count your blessings. Come, ye thankful people. Come now. Thank we all our God." To name a few. Okay, very good. Thank you very much. I wonder if what is it? Fife and Drum. I'm sure you probably know the song of Fife and Drum, Sound Engraver. That's a traditional song. It's usually taken as a Christmas song, but it would be, well, I don't know when it was traditionally from. If it was colonial, it might be Thanksgiving. If it's European, it's probably Christmas. I'm not entirely sure. Scrolling down, scrolling down. Da, da, da. Tony says, RJ, who would win a fight between Conan and Farfet? Farful, I can't remember. The way that I pronounce names in my head is not the way you're supposed to pronounce the names. Just to let you know, because I think it's Farful in the Grey Mouser that you're referring to. That's a really hard one to. I think that I don't know. I'm so used to if you're talking about Farfel from Farfel and the Grey Mouser, I'm so used to them being a pair, and they complete basically the heroic exploits of what both of them are trying to do. I don't think that if I'm talking about the character that you're talking about, Tony, I don't think that it would be a fair fight because Conan is used to being so independent on his own that it would be Conan most probably, in my mind. I could be wrong, but those are other great characters that some people should look up. There's a Mike Mignola miniseries. I think it's DC actually. Farfel in the Grey Mouser, or Farfit in the Grey Mouser, whatever it is. Beautiful, beautiful 4-issue graphic novel series, and a lot of artists that I've talked to, great artists that are working within the alternative comic scene that I'm on right now. They say that many of them say that comic is an inspiration to them. Many of them said, yeah, I got that on the corner of my desk and pull it out all the time. So great characters if we're talking about the same character. Let's see, scrolling down. Scrolling down. Let's see, there's a lot of cross chat, so I got to go past it. Back to John, and John says, thank you for finding those Phoenix Comic-Con streams, RJ. No problem. I just love the algorithm sometimes because I watch so many things like that and they just pop up for me, and sometimes I do search for them, but when I get them, I find them, I glom onto them. So I will put that in the comments when I'm done, John. Let's see. Scrolling down. Samuel says, the answer to what Thanksgiving music is Puritan hymns and Puritix Indian music. Or Powdatics? Patatux. I don't even know how to say that. Okay, I did not realize that, Samuel. That's um, Thanksgiving usually gets lost within Christmas, if you ask me. But anyways, scrolling down. Samuel, has this comment? Samuel has another comment. Says, Fourth Age, highly recommend the Disney Tarzan movie. It's a very simplified adaptation with beautiful animation from Glenn Keane. Very good. I should do that at some point. Scrolling down. Rex says, the movie you're thinking of is Greystroke, The Legend of Tarzan. Christopher Lambert. That's it. Thank you very much, Rex. Yes, thank you very much. That is exactly what I'm thinking of. Scrolling down. Let's see. People talking about Tarzan, The Legend of Greystoke. Very much. Oh, Taz is here. How you doing, Taz? Got a £5 super chat from Taz. It says, hey, RJ, late again, but hope everything is okay. Yeah, we're working off of some bad internet right now, Taz, but I'm doing my best here, and we'll get this live stream continuing on so that I can finish everybody's comments. But thank you very much for the super chat, Taz. If you want to ask some questions, Taz, with those super chats, you go right ahead. I appreciate very much every super chat that I get. So you want me to spend some extra time on something or anything, you go right ahead. Let's see. We have a comment from 21st Century Time Traveler. Not sure if I've seen you here before, Time Traveler. Welcome. Time Traveler says, RJ, have you read any of Philip Jose Farmer's stories? He wrote a Tarzan biography, and one for Doc Savage 2 connects a bunch of literary characters together as family members. Look up World Newton. I've never heard of that. I've never heard of that. I see. This is why I do live streams. You guys, I have such holes in my knowledge, and I realize that I am very specialized in what I know about, which is a lot of ancient stuff. But yes, that would be extremely interesting. I'll have to look that up. Thank you very much, Time Traveler. Let's see. Scrolling down, because I have never actually even heard of that before. Scrolling down. Strictly Jake, how you doing? He says, you should watch the first season of Invincible. People were so starved for good content, they sat through it, but there is a part that was so opposed to truth, the whole world groaned. It was rad. I haven't, quite honestly. I do watch some stuff on the internet, but I don't think I've had a television for probably 15 years now, at least. So, I miss a lot of things that go on the TV. Scrolling down. Honestly, I was thinking to myself, I was listening to a song today. What the heck was it? It was like, it was Hip to Be Square. It was on the radio. Anyways, he talks about watching television and just sitting down and watching television. I had the thought in the back of my mind, because again, maybe I'm completely off base because I haven't had a television for so long, but I thought to myself, how long is it going to take for people to not understand that line in the song? Because how long is it going to take for television to be a forgotten thing? Quite honestly, for me, it's almost a forgotten thing now. Scrolling down. Let's see. Rex has a good idea here. Rex says, fun crossover idea I had: Tarzan and King Kong on the Planet of the Apes. On the Planet of the Apes. That would be interesting, to say the least. A lot of older stories with those ape themes in them. Even DC Comics right up until the 70s, even into the 80s, sometimes with Gorilla Grodd and things like that. Let's see. Bethel says, let me pull this up 1 second. More comics question thrown into the round. Who was the first comic barbarian? Conan or Voltaire or Crom? Let's see. The first I don't really know. The first comic barbarian. That's a good question. I really don't know. I really don't know the answer to that question. Unless you're talking about my comics, but if you're talking about the historical comics, I don't really know, because again, you have the 18th century and early 19th century, late 18th century, early 19th century people talking and creating stories were very much civilized heroes, very much Prince Valiant kinds of heroes. Not a whole lot of barbarians until you get into Conan and things like that. So my guess would be Conan. So that would be my guess. Yeah, unless you have something else to clarify that question with, Bethel. Let's see. Scrolling down. Let's see what else I got here. Scrolling down. I got to go through. I have a comment from Sound Engraver. Gregorian chant rocks. I agree. There is some really good Crusader chants as well, by the way, up on YouTube, Sound Engraver. Some of them, I think it's, oh, what the heck is it? I think they might be in Old French and not in Latin, though. I can't remember it. French and Old Latin overlap in so many ways that it sort of sounds familiar to my ear, but not familiar enough. So the ones about King Louis, about the going off to the Crusades and King Louis, I love that song. There's a beautiful rendition of it on YouTube, talking, and if you can put the subtitles on as well if you want to understand what they're actually saying. And it's all about King Louis. What is it? They have lines like, King Louis has lost whole towns and cities. You're just going to lose your life. What is that compared to these cities and towns that King Louis has lost? Especially because, of course, you're going to lose your life because you're going to be, saved. You're going to have salvation for this because, you're serving God and the reclaiming of his holy land. That's basically the way that the old French chant goes. So interesting stuff up on YouTube. But again, I love a lot of this music that I find just out of nowhere. Let's see. Fife. Oh, if Sound Engraver's also talking about fife and drum. I think the there's only a really short version of it done by Bing Crosby, by the way. Let's see. Scrolling down. Samuel says, RJ, head banging to non-Dobis in this room while writing his story. Now, I don't non-Dobis. Yeah, no, I don't headbang, but I do enjoy trying to get the blood pumping. Let's put it that way. We'll put it that way. Let's see. Scrolling down. Have a scroll down a little bit of ways here to see people talking to each other, which is great. Tony has another comment saying, RJ, what are your thoughts on the 2016 Tarzan film? 2016? Tony, again, not even aware of the 2016 Tarzan film, quite honestly. So I live in the middle of the woods, Tony. And the closest town, closest village to me is a 15-minute drive. The closest town is a half an hour to 45-minute drive. And that's really, that's not really a big town. And things are closing down left, right, and center. My local comic shop is closed down. The theater closed down. So, I don't get a whole lot of connection to the outside world in movies, but that may change. Not that I'm moving anywhere. It's just that I might be spending more time trying to figure these things out. So scrolling down, I think I'm getting to the end of the comments here. I got another comment from 20th Century Time Traveler. RJ, I've been burning through all your videos while at work. You've definitely helped me in my own writing, especially in getting my head around how to write a noble hero. Thank you very much. Again, I always say to people, if you have the temperament, go and read. If that's what you're interested in, if you're interested in writing a valiant hero, a virtuous hero, as you say, a noble hero here, and you have the temperament, go back to Aristotle's Poetics. And he talks mostly about comedy there, but you do get to see with references to his discussions on tragedy, which are lost works. You get to see a lot of what he talks about, how to construct a good story and what a hero is supposed to be like, all that kind of thing. And it's not very long. So again, if you have the temperament, that's a good place to go. I would say, a lot of people say, go back to the hero's journey, all that kind of stuff. I would honestly say the hero's journey is just a rehashing of the Aristotelian ideal of a hero, if you ask me. So yes, I'll be making somebody happy. I think it was Maria who says I always have to mention Aristotle in every video I do. Scrolling down. Oops, let's see. John says, RJ regularly fights 4 grizzly bears each time just to get to the story. Not so much, but I do have to watch out for what do they call them around here? Coy wolves. if I go for a hike or things like that. They like to, just by the way, if you don't know what they are, it's basically a new breed of animal that popped up within the late 70s. I just want to talk about this because it's a fascinating subject that I ran across and no one ever really knows about it. Um, so I'm going to go off on a big tangent here, just because of that random comment. Let's put some Crom Destroy up in the background because we're talking about savage things here. Let's see. I gotta find this. There we go, Crom. Okay, 1 second here. So what happened was that Midwestern United States, Canada, destroyed the timber wolf. I think it was the major wolves in their area because of all the farming. So they basically wiped them out, and the thing was that when they got wiped out, the coyotes from the West Coast started to move into that because there was a a niche there that was left open for dogs. So the coyotes came into that empty area because coyotes were basically West Coast animals up until that time. So when the farming really started to take off, 1800s, I would probably say, and they wiped out most of the larger wolves. That's when you got these coyotes from the West moving in, and the thing was that within, I think it was the late 1970s, early 1980s, you got these environmentalists saying we need to reintroduce wolves into central North America, just because they were being just they wanted to reintroduce it as part of the ecosystem because they're environmentalists. And what they did was when they reintroduced the wolves into these areas, it caused a friction between them and the coyotes that were already there. And what happened with the coyotes was, in order for them to survive, their reproductive systems went on hyper overdrive, so that they would have giant litters of puppies over and over again because the wolves would kill so many of them that only a few would survive. And eventually, these coyotes started to get pushed out into different areas that they'd never been before. And they started to get pushed into the eastern part of North America. Now, when these coyotes, with their hyperactive reproductive system, got into eastern North America, they started to interbreed with the smaller eastern wolves that are on the coast, on the East Coast, because a basically you get a large coyote would be about the size of a small female eastern wolf. And so what you got was a brand new interesting species within the last almost 40, I wouldn't even say 50 years, probably 40 years within the East Coast. And they're basically coy wolves because they interbreeded these coyotes with their hyperactive breeding system. That was because of what that happened to them. And again, interbreeding with the wolves, which sometimes doesn't work. Like for coy dogs can't reproduce, but these coy wolves could reproduce and then reproduce from those reproductions because coy dogs are like a dead end, right? Anyways, so you got this new form of animal on the East Coast right now, which most people don't even realize, which is coy wolves, because they think of them simply as coyotes, but they're much bigger than the coyotes that you would find on the West Coast, much bigger. And they're much more vicious. Let me just put it that way, because they have taken onto them the most dangerous traits of both the coyotes and the wolves. Coyotes can do amazing things, by the way. They can throw their voices. And one of the things that they do is they trick prey into basically, I sent a video of this one time. It was fascinating. There was a group of coyotes. They were hiding in the woods, and there were buffalo. And one of the coyotes went out and I think it might have been one of the coy wolves, or if it was coyotes. One of the coyotes went out and basically tried to play with one of the young buffalo, and they basically were playing tag. And the coyote would go and hit him with his paw, and the buffalo would come back and hit him with his antlers because it would just be a young buffalo, right? And the thing was that the rest of the buffalo just ignored this after a while and they thought they were just playing. But what the coyote was really doing was every time it would get the buffalo to run towards him, he would take it a little farther away, a little farther away, a little farther away until they got over a hill and then until they got close to a bunch of trees. And then all the rest of the coyotes came out of the trees and just destroyed this little animal. So this is the kind of things that coyotes can do. And then you mix that with the viciousness of a wolf, which coyotes are typically afraid of people, but wolves are not, especially if they learn not to be afraid. So yeah, you get these eastern coy wolves. They are dangerous. I know up in where is it? It's like the Cabot Trail within like Cape Breton. It's Eastern Canada. They now have to have these signs all over the place because they've had people be attacked by groups of these coy wolves and killed. So yeah, that's a fascinating thing I just wanted to say. Fascinating thing I just wanted to say. Anyways, let's see. I'll scroll down and see if I missed anything. Let's see. Rex says, one of my favorite tropes appeal to audacity. A character's story is too ridiculous to simply be made up. That's interesting. Taz also has a comment. He says, did you know, RJ, that the yellow kid was the first strip character that gave speech bubbles with text and the comics follow? Yeah, that is something I didn't know, Taz, but very interesting that you bring that up because within the interview that I was talking about with Will Eisner, he does bring up the yellow kid as one of those ethnic comic strips. Although, if you, I don't know, he basically says, and I can't confirm this, he says that the yellow kid is supposed to be Chinese, but he's not actually Chinese. He's somebody playing at being Chinese. He's a different kind of ethnicity. Anyways, but yeah, very interesting history of comics. So glad you brought that up, Taz. Let's see. Let's see. Scrolling down a little bit, Rex has another comment. Also, about what I'm making because I'm starting over. I can't show anything yet, but it's basically young man becomes a giant flying, fiery, heroic snake man who fights monsters and gods. Very interesting. Okay. I did see some of your old art, Rex, so I kind of know where he's going with that. But yeah, it sounds like Yi-On-T. If you're going back to Conan or even Dungeons and Dragons, Yi-On-T would be half man, half snake, which basically was what Thulsa Doom is in the original Arnold Schwarzenegger Conan the Barbarian. He's basically a Yi-On-T. Let's see. Scrolling down. John says, cry wolf. Yes, cry wolf. I don't cry wolf lightly. And I make sure I carry, let's just say, at the very least, rudimentary weapons with me when I go outside into the backwoods of my property. Scrolling down. Genuine Comics is here. How you doing, Genuine Comics? Glad to see you here. Scrolling down. Comment from Final. No, say Hike. It's all run together. They don't catch the Roadrunners. No, they don't catch the Roadrunners. Use name. I'll just say use name. I'm sorry, my eyes are bad, especially when I don't put my glasses on to do these live streams. So things bleed together, especially when there's no spaces between them. All right. Scrolling down, Michael says, sounds like you got some weird monsters out there. No, they're very interesting. They're very interesting. And it's not just me coming up with this stuff. It's there's actual books on this been published probably 30 years ago now. So, let's see, scrolling down. John says, how do you defend yourself against the coy wolves? How do you defend yourself? First of all, you got to make sure that you understand that the one in front of you is probably not the only one. They go in packs. So that's one of the things, again, for coyotes, they like to be by themselves or in one and twos. But for wolves, they travel in packs. And that's one of the dangerous things that these coyotes actually will do. They will travel in packs. And sometimes you'll see them one and two, more likely two or three. But again, they'll even get into packs. So you got to realize, first of all, that the one you're looking at is probably not the one that you need to be afraid of. It's like, that from the first Jurassic Park where the Velociraptors, the one in front of them distracted him and the other two went at him from the back and the side. Yeah, that's exactly what you got to watch out for. So you're supposed to carry a staff with you and at very least a knife, if not a gun. And you make yourself loud. It's kind of like what you would do with a mountain lion, which is make yourself as large as possible, especially if you take something like a large stick and wave it above your head, to make it look at yourself as large as possible and as loud as possible. Again, if that's my training on how to deal with the mountain lion, basically back away and get out of their area. Because but the thing is, with coy wolves, they're actually looking for you as prey, whereas mostly mountain lions are saying, get away from here, this is where I live. So scrolling down. So Sound Engraver, what are you doing, Sound Engraver? You already gave me a super chat. There's another one. um for the informative coy wolf story. Thank you very much, Sound Engraver. Thank you. All right. I don't know if anybody lives on the East Coast, and I'm Northern East Coast. Most of my life was spent on Northern East Coast, up and down the Northern East Coast. So I'm very much an East Coast person, although my accent is a mismatch of different parts of no matter how far north or south I go. But anyways, let's see. There we go. Tony says it right here. Tony says the yellow kid's supposed to be Irish. Exactly. That's what Will Eisner said. And I was thinking, the yellow kid is supposed to be Irish. I never knew that. Honestly, I didn't. That's an interesting bit of trivia. All right, let's get to these last comments here. Rex says, RJ, there's also a nag from Hindu mythology. Again, don't think I'm pronouncing that correctly, but yes, I am aware of that. And the Lama from Greek, Lamia from Greek mythology, they're also snake people. I had never thought about that. That's a good character to use. Because I'm just wondering, because for Crom the Destroyer, I have a lot of Greek mythical creatures in it. So that's the one I've never thought of. Thank you very much, Rex. Maybe sometime in the future, I will get into some of those characters, because right now I'm focusing on more the, I guess, the Harpy and Arinia's kind of characters right now. Let's see, scrolling down. Michael says, love James Earl Jones in that first Conan movie. Agreed. So did I. That was one of his best performances, if you ask me, even though it was kind of campy. I like campy. Samuel says, we don't have wolves anymore, but we do have coyotes where I am, and I like to follow the deer across the road from my neighborhood, and other problems are rattlers, scorpions, cougars, and black bears. Yeah. Okay. That's enough. Oh, by the way, just something to stick in here. Then over the last couple, over the last year or so, I think it was over the last year, they're starting to find these. They call them coyotes on the East Coast. They'll just call them coyotes, but a lot of the time they're probably coy wolves. But they're down in we'll say they've seen them below Boston. Let's put it that way. So they're moving south. Just to let you know. Scrolling down. Let's see. Calliope says, it's spooky at night where I am walking the dogs while the coyotes are sounding off. Some nights we can even hear the wolves howling. I had no idea coy wolves were a factor. Hard orange covering, eye, face, blue, white. Yeah, I can hear coyotes from my house all the time. The coy wolves, I can hear them. I know. I've seen them when I drive up the long road to where I live. There's farmers who have basically, I don't know if you know what they look like, large sections of covered bales, and I've seen the coy wolves basically dancing across the top of them because they're going after smaller prey that hide within all the hay, all that kinds of stuff. So yeah, they definitely have homes around me somewhere. Where, I don't know. I actually wanted to track them down at one point, but then I thought to myself, that's probably not the best idea. So anyway, scrolling down. Let's see. Samuel says, that's not how I was told how to deal with the cougar of the fourth age. I was told to just shout at it if you have a gun, or shoot at it if you have a gun, or else to just get bolder. If not, you're just screwed. Okay. I've actually, I've spent, again, East Coast, you don't get very much of those kinds of things on the East Coast. So thank you for correcting me, Samuel. Let me put it that way. So I would take Samuel's advice over mine if you're out and about, because they are dangerous creatures. I'll tell you that right now. Let's see. Sound Engraver says, no wolves where I am, maybe a sighting. I did live in the Northeast growing up, where we live in fox country. I see red foxes all the time. Red foxes. I wonder, Sound Engraver, do you have gray foxes where you are? They're an East Coast phenomena. They were very specific to one part of the East Coast up until about the late 1800s. But there are gray foxes. So, and they've been expanding, I think. You don't see them very often. Scrolling down. John says, darn it, RJ, keep those koi wolves up there. No, they actually are moving down. They've been seen south of Boston. So let's see. Getting to the last of these comments. Rex says, I've heard it possible that Medusa was originally a long haired goddess in pre classical Greek before the Indo Europeans established Athens and the Greek city state. Yes, there are some older, if I remember correctly, Rex, there are some older um, stories because that's why she would be connected more to the Titans than to the gods, which is why you get those stories. If I remember correctly, it was, I don't know what it was. Anyways, one of the Titans, I can't remember off the top of my head. One of the Titans that got buried basically on a under a mountain. And he had 3 daughters, but they were just products of his body, or it depends on what story that you're going with, because there's different accounts of it, which is where Medusa and her sisters came from. So yeah, they would be pre-Greek stories that were brought into the Greek. That's why they have that connection with the Titans, if I remember correctly. Let's see. Calliope says Wisconsin wilderness coyotes, wolves, and black bears. Oh my. Yeah, black bears are a thing unto themselves. Although there is a black bear season, if I remember correctly. Although where I am right now, they just you can kill coy wolves and coyotes just for a bounty. We have a bounty on them here. Or last I checked, I did. Last time I worked on a farm, there was bounties on them. So you just got to bring in their tail to the government and they'll pay you for it, or they used to. Anyways, scrolling down. Let's see. Sound engraver. Oh, Chris says, hi, RJ. Now I feel lucky just now that all I have to worry about is skunks. That's well, that's a good thing. Sound engraver says, yes, gray foxes I've seen too. Very, very interesting breed, sound engraver. And interesting history to the breed, if you ever want to look it up. Scrolling down, Rex says, I also heard that the Titans were an important concept, possibly, and I'm not even going to pronounce that correctly, from Mesopotamia, gods in the underworld. That's an interesting, very interesting connection. Michael Bancroft over at Late Night from Comicsgate has his book, which is The Lucent, and it goes back into the mythology of the Mesopotamians, going back into that kind of older mythology, whereas I'm going into the Greek. So he has some very interesting stories over there if you want to go. He has, I think his second book is out now, and you can order both of them and from his website. So it's The Lucent. You can find him at The Lucent on Twitter, but it's Michael Bancroft, if anybody doesn't know. Let's see, scrolling down, we'll get to the end. Bethel says, old school D&D used a lot of monsters from mythology. Yes, indeed, they did. That's, yeah, you're right, Bethel, because if I'm remembering the original, what is it? I'm not sure if it was the original monster manual. I think how do you pronounce it even? Naga. I think that's how you pronounce it. It wasn't in the original monster manual, but it was in the compendium, which was the Fiend Folio, if I remember correctly. You gave me something to look up. Thank you very much, Bethel. Let's see. Incubus Time Lord is here. How you doing, Incubus? Very nice to see you. All right, let's get through these last comments because I've been talking for almost an hour and a half. Samuel says, come to think of it, wild predators are great classical antagonists in stories like Conan. They are indeed. This is one of the things I want to do with my my stories is to go back to mythological creatures, but also to go back to animals at some point. I want to write a lot of stories that have to do with Crom the Destroyer and see if I get them published, not just as comics, but also as sort of Robert E. Howard kinds of short stories. So I would love to do basically wild animals as well. Some very, very interesting Conan stories in that vein. I would agree. Let's see. Michael also says here, if I got to pull it up, Medusa, Sethano, and Urula are the Gorgon sisters. Yes, I would pronounce them much better if I could see them in the Greek. Michael, let's just put it that way. But thank you very much for putting that in the comments. Quite honestly, my mind when I see Greek words, my mind goes to Greek text. So, anyways, so I always mess myself up. Samuel says, I myself haven't seen a wild cougar while hiking. Allegedly, my little brother had an encounter of two passing by his campsite while his scout troop were in the tents. Holy Moses. Yeah, yeah, that would not be something I would want to have to endure. Samuel also says, you know what could be a great resource for writing characters dealing with animals deep in the wild, writing a Teddy Roosevelt in his mountain man days. Yeah, there's some great stories out there. There is a little bit of that within Crom the Destroyer, just a tiny little bit, a tiny little hint of that when the main character King is trying to get back on his feet. So it's sort of like in between chapters of the first of a chapter. But anyways, I have gotten to the end of the questions, end of the chat. I want to thank everyone for showing up here on a Thursday night. And I am going to give you my outro, which is the small 45-second trailer for Crom the Destroyer. And I want to thank everybody for coming. And as I always say, at the end here, links are in the description for my 3 graphic novels, my 2 superhero graphic novels. Thomas Valiant and the Valiant Heroes can be ordered through the Valiant Hero Indiegogo site, and you can also order Crom the Destroyer from that Indiegogo site. We are hoping, just by the way, within, I'm not sure the next, or maybe 2 campaigns from now, to try to get our own site up so we don't have to depend on Indiegogo. So we're looking forward to that if we can get that done. So thank you very much, everyone, for being here. And I need to take Samuel off of the screen so that I can put this trailer up. Thank you once again, everyone, for showing up. And I will see y'all later. Bye.
No matter how many wars you fight, no matter how much blood you shed, no matter how much rage you loose, no matter how many demons you face, no matter how many companions you lose, no matter if our kingdom falls, I know that you will return to me in honor.